Hello there, woman beings, and welcome to another episode of the Woman Being Podcast.
Yeah.
We are so excited for this episode. Some of us might be having trauma diarrhea just thinking about it, but we don't care because we're here to share with you about friendship breakups. Woo. Dun dun dun! I'm Emma. This is Kelly. This is Kellyanne, and we are stoked to dive in with you today. So let's get started. As we get started on this episode, I also want to put a standing trigger warning out because this episode does talk about mental health and touches a little bit on self-harm. And so we're just gonna go ahead and warn you about that. If that's something that you don't feel comfortable with listening to, if that's something that's gonna be hard for you, feel free to skip to a different episode of ours and give it a listen. So, enjoy. This is Woman Being,
where we explore thoughts and opinions
and have the freedom to change our minds.
Without expectation or judgment,
we will hold a safe space and support each other
as we navigate together in the form of feminine. Are we having a friendship breakup?
I think we need to have a friendship breakup.
This is going to be a huge falling out. What are our
Ladies,
fans going to do? What do we tell our fans?
This is the end.
Right as we're making our comeback.
I just can't do it anymore. I can't do it anymore.
It really is like the Joe Bros.
Yeah. Wait, did they break up again?
No, but like they came together for like a little bit and then they're like, no, it's too much. And now they're like actually back.
Oh, yes, you're right. Because they came out with that pom-pom
They
song.
like flirted with us.
Yeah.
It was like, how dare you?
How dare you,
Figure
Jonas
out
Brothers.
your shit.
Okay. Ladies.
Emma.
We are talking today about friendship breakups. Ooh. And maybe this sounds like a weird thing to say. Like, maybe this isn't a term that people are necessarily familiar with. I think you could also call it like a falling out with a friend, or some sort of, well, actually, have you guys experienced this? And what is it? Well, the people want to know.
Ooh.
Yes, I've experienced this. And I think breakup, or at least in my case, I think breakup is a very real, accurate word for it because it literally felt like a breakup. I've never actually even broken up with a person other than her that felt that intense. But essentially I was kind of stuck in a relationship where someone was having mental health issues and depression issues and some suicide, self-harm type of issues, and kind of was using that as a form of manipulation to keep me in the relationship. And eventually I came to the realization that it was for my benefit and hers that we no longer be friends. And I shared lots of personal information that I was never supposed to share with anybody, with her parents, so that they could get her proper help, and then told her I needed to not be friends with her anymore, and it was kind of explosive.
That sounds really hard.
Yeah, I was like 14, so
yeah.
It's like a lot to go through at like such a young age, and there weren't like resources really back then for you with any sort of mental health issues unless you were having the mental health issues, and those mental health issues were severe.
Yeah.
So it was kind of like figuring out on our own. And I think maybe these days there's a lot more information out there or education out there on abuse and mental health issues and what to do and that sort of thing. But at the time, there wasn't really a roadmap.
Yeah. Gosh. And I think that's what's so important about this topic, because there's not a roadmap for when it's like, I feel like there's so many like relational tools out there for like romantic relationships or setting boundaries with people that are unhealthy for you. But it's like, oh, how do you actually, one, decide a friendship is no longer helpful and viable for either of you, and then walk away with respect? Because that's the thing, like, that's very rarely the outcome. I mean, I've been through so much drama, like, in my younger years, but also, you know, like, I was a church goer. So it was like church girl drama. Like, someone's spreading a rumor that this girl was fingered by her boyfriend, and that's just the worst thing ever. And it's like, whoa, that's actually something that you shouldn't be telling other people. But like you don't have that like awareness. But yeah, I've been through a lot of drama. I mean, girls, young women spreading lies about others intentionally to try and create division so that she may enter said friend group and bring, like, oh, I'm so sorry, I can't even believe this person would say that about you kind of thing. Or, gosh, what are some other great ones? Or even just like, hey, you said this and it was really hurtful to me, but like, I'm not going to say it that way. I'm going to like cast you out. Or another girl feeling really hurt that I would go off with another friend at a summer camp and then yell at me and cause a scene in front of a bunch of other girls. And I'm like, I don't know what I did. Like, so I feel like I've been through a lot of drama. Thankfully, not a lot of the friend, quote unquote, breakups did come to a resolution or a restoration. But there are definitely several girls that were in my life that I just kind of like created space from. But also looking back, I'm like, oh, there were girls in my life that I created space from that I didn't actually need to create space from. And so that's an interesting tension to carry as well. All in all, now I'm actually very cautious when I approach friendships. It takes me a while to gain trust with you. It takes me a while to like open up and be vulnerable with you. And I think it is because of all the drama that happened when I was much younger. Because I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to actually deal with that again. Like, I actually don't have space with that. So, all that to say, yes, I have dealt with my fair share of friendship breakups and drama dramas.
What about you, Emma?
Well, I will say, reflecting on this, I'm a little, I guess, ashamed to admit that I feel like I've often been, not often, but multiple instances that I think of that would qualify as sort of in the realm of friendship breakups, I was the one who was in the wrong, honestly, where I would decide. I guess my friendship breakups have taken the form of more like ghosting. And there's been a couple instances I can think of where I would decide, I don't really want to be friends with the person anymore because XYZ, but they were very bad reasons. There was a girl in like middle school, early high school, who I decided, I don't really want to be friends with her anymore because she's just not cool enough. And I want to elevate my status. Like, that's terrible. And she'd been my friend for years. So, like, I'm like, whew, I was a very crappy person in that situation. And there was never, like, a straight-up confrontation in the sense of, like, a breakup. But there were, like, other friends being like, why don't you hang out with da-da-da anymore? Like, what? Did something happen? And I'm like, no, I just don't like her anymore. Like, that was me. And so I feel like ashamed thinking about that. I also ghosted several friends who were my very close friends in high school when I left for college because the guy I was dating at the time didn't like them.
Oh.
And I feel terrible about that to this day.
Totally.
And have tried to make some amends with them a little bit. But it's, yeah. When I look at it, I'm kind of like, ooh, I'm the bad guy. With all that to say, all of those things were quite a while ago. I've also...
Yeah, you're not going to just, like, walk out on us.
Well, actually,
You're not gonna-
probably after this episode, you're not going to hear from me again.
We're okay.
Yeah, you're
good
done.
to that makes sense.
Yeah.
We will have to rebrand as The Kelly Show.
Hi, I'm Kelly, and I'm Kelly. Welcome to The Kelly Show.
That would be so sad. I don't want to talk about it. It makes me sad.
Yeah. All that to say, I am thankful that we're talking about this because I can look back and reflect on ways that I have matured in that area. And recognizing that reasons like my boyfriend not liking someone or wanting to be more popular are very bad reasons to break up a friendship. But yeah, I've definitely experienced it in those senses that feel a bit more like breakups rather than just growing apart,
Right.
you know? But another thing, which I've experienced this firsthand quite a few times as well, is when you are in the middle of a friendship breakup. So if you're in a friend group and two of them are having a breakup and you're in the middle of it and you're like, oh, shoot. This happened to me actually my freshman year of college. There was a group of girls on my floor that we all became really close really fast. And it was sort of like, oh, we're so excited, college. And we're like on the same floor. We're just all BFFs. And that faded over time as we realized our differences to an extent. And there wound up being a split within this group where basically one girl was like, oh, we don't really like you anymore. And like, she's not part of the group anymore. But then like two other girls were like still friends. And I was in the middle like, how do I, because like, how do you balance like hanging out with both people and like spending time with them and not totally destroying your relationship or like picking sides because it's not even your conflict. Or maybe you think the conflict is dumb, you know? Yeah. So have you guys experienced that type of thing?
I have experienced that. I actually lived in a house with girls in my first year of ministry school. And I was friendly with everyone and like kind, but there was one girl that I was particularly close with. And as the year kind of went on, it just felt like there was so much drama. And I personally, like, people in the house were like kind of going at it, and there was one girl that kind of came at me, but I just I keep my distance from that kind of stuff now at this point. And the one girl I was close with, I am still close with, like, to this day. Like, I would consider her one of my most treasured friends. And those other girls, like, I don't really talk to. It's not that I don't like them or that they aren't great, but I just am the kind of person that when there is like so much dramas going on, I just kind of take a back seat because I think it's kind of a waste of time. And if it's handled immaturely, it's like, hey, like, just work out your shit together and then like do what you need. But like, I was kind of caught in a house with a decent amount of conflict that it didn't feel like there was ever much resolve. Right. And I'm just like, I'm just not interested.
I don't know if I've ever experienced that close up. Like, I've definitely been in situations where it's like, I'm friends with this person and this person, but not super closely to either of them in particular. And they're like feuding. And I'm just sort of like, well, whatever. I can like kind of navigate this because I'm not necessarily BFFs with anybody. But when I had my friend break up with my friend, that created a huge division in my friend group. Because we had a very tight-knit group, probably just a little bit too codependent, a little bit too tight-knit. I feel like I've had to learn boundaries throughout my adult life. So no boundaries. And my split with her, we had kind of been like the best friends, and everyone sort of like was
centered around that.
Yeah, and when we split, I think that probably made a ton of really awkward situations for everybody else. And like on top of that, we're, you know, a core group in our youth group and like a core group at school, and it just, I think it probably created some complications, but it got really gnarly. Like it was like she's posting things on Facebook, like, you know, like half about someone, they're obviously about someone, and if you know what's going on, you know what's happening, but like, so she was posting things like that, like, oh, I thought you said you would always be my friend forever, things like that.
Yeah. And so passive aggressive.
Just like, yeah, the cringy teenager stuff that we all did. But my mom, thankfully, was a big mentor for me during that and was like, once it's up there, it's always up there. And so she coached me through not responding passive aggressively to Facebook posts with other passive-aggressive Facebook posts, thankfully.
Wow. That's super helpful. Like, go mom.
Yeah, no, she was thankfully very involved at that point. And she was a huge part of the reason that I realized I was in a really unhealthy situation. And it's kind of like, it's funny how you sort of discover that you're in an abusive relationship where you sort of think like, oh, things are really hard right now, but you don't know until you're like you become friends with someone else and you're like, oh, they don't treat me like that. Or
Yeah.
or just a friend makes an observation that's like, oh, that doesn't seem normal.
Yeah.
You know, like just those small little comments made a huge difference in my world because I just didn't have a grid for what healthy relationships looked like at all.
Totally.
And it got pretty gnarly. And we're in the same church, we're in the same youth group, you know.
Oh,
so
that's
it was
so
just
hard.
She like our parents were very, very close friends. And so like I was showing up to her house sometimes on Friday nights and like having dinner, and so it was kind of just this really awkward season.
It's so surprising to me looking back and seeing how much drama actually was like amongst church friends.
Yeah, well,
Like
and
the majority
and
to
I've
me.
said this before, but I think like we spend so much time talking about other things. Like church isn't teaching healthy relationship or good boundaries or like normal
Or confrontation.
Yeah,
healthy confrontation.
Healthy confrontation.
What
like,
that looks like.
And they're especially not talking about mental health at that time and any of those things. So like I didn't have a grid for like, what do I do if my friend, you know, doesn't want me to join the basketball team because she doesn't want me to be spending time at practices. She wants me to be available for her. And then when I do join the basketball team, she cuts herself because she's devastated by it. And I feel like I'm responsible for her mental health issues, and that if I'm not her friend anymore, she's going to commit suicide or harm herself in some way. Like
So hard.
there was literally no grid for that at that point.
Totally.
And so it was a really weird, confusing time. I don't even know if I've processed it all at this point. But I've at least been able to like find words for what happened. Like, oh, I was in an abusive, controlling, manipulative relationship. And she was using her mental state as a bargaining chip. Or not a bargaining chip. Our relationship is bargaining chip. I don't know, whatever. Things like that have just helped me look back and understand. But yeah, I was so eager to please and so eager to be the hero and so eager to help her that I thought I was doing the right thing. You know, like I thought I was taking on a worthy cause, you know?
Totally.
Like I'm helping this person process their depression and suicidal thoughts, or I'm going to somehow be that good Christian in her life that she needs, or whatever that is. And there's a lot of white saviorism probably thrown in there. Not that she was also white, but it wasn't that. But it's kind of like this idea that you
Savior complex. Too.
Yeah, savior complex thing, and feeling like that was the Jesus thing to do, and confrontation is not the Jesus thing to do, and boundaries are not the Jesus thing to do. So yeah, confusing times. I remember walking out of it being like, no one ever told me like what to do.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely. I mean, I think looking back, that is the biggest thing. Like my mom, whom I love, did not know how to coach me through those things. And so I was just like, I ended up in freeze a lot because there was this one time in 6th grade that we were in Sunday school, and a friend who we ended up patching things up, but she asked the Sunday school teacher in front of all the girls, all of our friends, and a Sunday school teacher whom I adored, what would you do if you had a friend doing all these things? And it was clearly about me, even though she did not name me, but everyone in the room knew it was me.
Oh my God.
And 6th grade, she didn't know what to do, and she was trying to be as healthy as she could be, but literally as she knew how. But the Sunday school teacher literally was like, that sounds like a bad friend.
Oh,
and
wow.
I actually would probably not be around that person anymore. And I remember just being like so completely crushed. Like, I'm a bad person. I'm a bad friend. And my mom's position was literally just like, you need to apologize and make it right. And now, like, that I am grown, looking back, I'm like, oh, that sweet little sixth grade girl that felt openly attacked and called out in front of everyone. And I have grace for the person that did it. because also I'm very aware of like where we came from and the culture around mental health and good girl complex and all that stuff. But I just was like, I'm going to do anything to make this right. But I never held space for myself in the healing process and the grieving process of like, oh, that was so painful. That hurt so bad. And I think there's also like, how do we teach a healthy grieving process? And maybe it's like, oh, you're being made to look like the bad guy. You might have done something wrong, but you actually didn't know the weight of what was wrong, and you try to make it right. And then maybe it's made right. And then it's like, oh, but like, how do you actually feel like you can self-advocate at the same time? It's really interesting. There's so much to unpack.
Yeah, really there is. I'm curious to hear more about like just the feelings that you guys felt as you went through friendship breakups and falling outs.
Completely devastated. Like totally devastated. And until it was the point that I was like, okay, you know what? This person causes drama everywhere they go. I don't need them. I'm going to distance myself and just like ghost them. Like I would say hi and be nice, but I'm like, anytime someone would be like, oh, do you want to come over to my house? And it was someone that I felt like was just dramatic and caused drama, I would just be like, I'm busy tonight. Like in like 7th grade, I was just like, yeah, I'm not like interested.
You're like, I'm sick. Like in Mean Girls.
Literally. I just was like, no, I just don't like, I don't want to deal. I never wanted to deal with people that were going to like completely drain my energy and people that didn't have enough relational equity with me to actually work out a conflict. That I was just like, I'm good.
Yeah.
But yeah, complete devastation. Like I just felt internally like my world was crumbling because that was your world at that age.
Yeah.
Yeah, your friends and like who you're around and stuff. I felt a lot of things. I had and probably still have such an intense desire to please and to be the good person that breaking up with people was really hard for me. I was prone to befriend the uncool kids, namely because my brother was severely bullied all throughout his life, and he had his own issues that I don't know. I mean, I don't know like how much that played a role, but like I was always trying to find people who may not on the outside look like a cool person or like a normal person, but like to know them on the inside. And there's lots of good intentions behind that, but the harmful side of that is that I didn't have good references for normal behavior. And I didn't know how to determine the difference between someone who is uncool just because they, didn't wear cool clothes and someone who is uncool because they had issues and they were hard to deal with. And and so when I broke up with her, I don't even know. That was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. It was saying, no, my health matters more than you right now. And I think unraveling a lot of the toxic patterns that I had picked up from being in a relationship with her took years. Probably still is taking years, and it affected my marriage. It affected the way that Ross and I corresponded about conflict. It affected a lot of things. It affected my other friendships, and I cried a lot. I was angry a lot. Thankfully, I had my mom or whatever. But one thing I look back on that still perplexes me is when you have an abuser and a victim, and like that relationship is fun. You finally get the victim out of the situation or whatever. You like provide resources to that person, and you put them in counseling or you know,
Yeah.
trauma therapy or whatever it is. But what happened in our situation was I got out and my friend was the one who got therapy and medication and support. And it was just like, okay, well, Kelly's great now because we've removed the problem. And I look back and I'm like, man, I really could have used some like clear, wise counsel during that time. Because I mean, like, again, I was 14.
Yeah.
And I like one of the most defining relationships outside of my family in my life had been like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, yet, I mean, I feel very lucky that I've landed where I have now, you know, because I would imagine that the pattern would be to fall in other abusive relationships and to continue the cycle and never get out and never recognize those patterns. And I feel very much like I was totally rescued from that inevitability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really good. I definitely agree with you. There's not support for the other person always. Or like in my case, it felt like I was being publicly shamed into better behavior without having a personal conversation about the actual issue. And so for me, I was like, well, I'm clearly a bad person, so I'm going to shame myself into being a better person. And the important point is to reconcile. But in the process, I shut a lot of myself down.
Yeah.
Like, and just was like, just fit into the mold, just make it happen so that you can be better. Because clearly this is a problem. And so, yeah, it was very interesting. And I think, yeah, I agree with, or I would echo what you said is it took years. And also to still today, I probably am unraveling some of those things. And just being like, you know what? Like, you were so young. You were so naive. Like, how could you have known? You wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Like, you can't put that expectation on yourself. But it instilled this great, deep fear of ever doing something wrong. And there was not the space for
Mistakes.
Yeah. It was like, oh no, don't you can avoid mistakes. Mistakes are avoidable. But in a sense, that's removing a portion of your humanity.
Yeah, I feel like for me, it's been learning to not be a doormat for people. Like, my existence is not for the purpose of fixing other people's problems, helping them become better people, meeting their needs. Like, that is not my purpose here in life. And like, my choice to do those things is more powerful than me being taken advantage of.
Yeah.
And yeah, still learning that. But I think, I mean, obviously and thankfully, not in the same type of extreme situation because, yeah, like it was heavy. Like, that is not, those are not the things that a 12-year-old, 13, 14-year-old should be handling.
Yeah.
And those were the things I was handling.
Absolutely.
And by myself because I wasn't allowed to tell anybody about it.
And I mean, in terms of support in general, the thing is, which we touched on this a little bit, but like people talk about romantic breakups and they talk about how hard it is. If you're going through a breakup, your friends will want to check on you, see how you're doing, ask you how you're handling it. They'll there's a lot more around like how to handle that. But you have a friendship breakup and you don't get that kind of support.
Right.
There's not people checking in on you and saying, oh, are you okay after this or whatever. Like you said with your relationship, Kelly, like it was like, oh, Kelly's okay because she's out of it now. And it's like, well, no, you're dealing now with the ramifications. You've lost a relationship that's very important to you in your life.
Right.
And now you're grieving it. You're processing everything that happened. You're feeling the loss and maybe also feeling relief, but also feeling confused because I feel like when you're going into a romantic relationship, you think, okay, we're deciding. There's a lot of definitive decisions.
Yes, for sure. Like, will you be my girlfriend?
Yes.
Will you be yes.
You decide we are going to be together. And then it's like, okay, we are going to actively make time to spend together, to build trust, to do all these things. But you are also aware, oh, this could end. You know? Like, it's not like you're wanting it to end or hoping for it to end, but that is an awareness that, like, oh, breakups happen. You start a friendship and you don't go, hey, will you be my official friend? Like, they just sort of happen, right? And they sort of just grow. And I'm not saying that we need to implement, like, friendship stages of relationship that you like establish, where you say, okay, now you're my official friend.
Gone from acquaintance to,
like,
tertiary
will you
friend.
be my but we go into friendships in a very different way.
Yeah.
And we don't think, oh, this could end.
We don't have our guards up at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I went
especially when you're young.
Especially when you're young, especially when it's a good Christian family.
Yeah, you can trust them.
Yeah, they're trustworthy because they love Jesus, and your parents are friends with their parents. So what's the problem? There's nothing to to have your guards up on, and so confusion I think is probably one of the top feelings that I felt. Is not, I didn't even have words to articulate what had happened to me.
Yeah,
and I mean, I wonder what she thinks about it today. I don't know. But like that level of how deep we went, and I didn't know. I had no idea what I was signing up for.
Yeah.
And I wanted her to be like, to believe that I was there for her. And I was saying things like, no, I'm not going to just stop being your friend. I'm going to be your friend forever. Like, this is great. Like, I'm not one of those terrible people that would just abandon you. Like, I was saying things like that because she was, I mean, essentially manipulating me into pledging my allegiance to her. But, like, I don't think she herself knew that. I mean, we did have a really large age difference, which is probably a good red flag for you there. She was like 4 or 5. She's 5 years older than me. Oh. And so when we started being friends, I was 12 and she was 16, 15, 16. So, like we were in very different stages of life, and it was easy to get me to do what she wanted.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're going to trust her because she's older,
right?
So why would you question her when you're so much younger and she's had so much more life experience?
Yes, I had this inherent trust for her wisdom that she had gained in the world.
Yeah.
And super, super, like I look back and I'm like, there's so many red flags. And I'm like, I don't know what. I mean, I know what I was thinking, but like also, what was I thinking?
Yeah. I really like what you said though, Emma, about like, I wasn't nearly as impacted by relationship breakups.
Totally.
As I was by like friendship breakups or friendship dramas. I literally would start dating someone knowing I'm not going to marry this guy. Like, but this is fun. And this is what you do at this age, which is probably not the right approach to dating.
What is
maybe
the right
it is.
approach
I don't
to
know.
dating?
Well, but that's because we're taught things going into relationships in high school, right? Like our parents are intentionally teaching us the odds are your high school relationship is not going to be your forever relationship. Here are things that you can do. Like, no, you don't go into your bedroom with the door closed. No, like there's like boundaries that your parents are overseeing and setting up to essentially ensure that you don't have sex. But those boundaries and that teaching doesn't exist for friendships. You're not telling people, hey, the odds are you're not probably going to be friends with the people you're friends with in high school and middle school.
It's like no.
You're probably going to move on and make really good friends in college. Nobody told me that.
No, and it's like there's this idea that like if you're friends, you are friends.
Right,
and
forever.
Like this is like
we are going to live
till
together.
Death do us part.
We're going to buy a farm and each have a house on the same plot of land, and we're going to, ride all the horses together and like have our children together.
That's
like
pretty specific to you.
No, that was the plan.
Totally.
Or like we're going to all live on the same neighborhood and like take our kids to school together. Like that. Yeah.
Yep. And it's seeing that when it doesn't work out, it's a failure. That something went wrong, that one of you did something wrong. There's not this level of like, wait, like this actually just isn't a good fit for me. Like, I think you're nice. You got some stuff to work out. Like, I'm actually like, no, I don't want to come spend the night at your house. But instead, I felt a lot of pressure to be the nice girl. And no, go to the slumber party, go to the sleepover. And I was like, actually, it felt like a lot of violation of boundaries, actually, at a very young age. And it was because, you know, kids have their moms, and sometimes moms take things very personally that happen to their children.
Oh,
and then that mom goes and talks to your mom, and then your mom is like, well,
what would Jesus do?
yeah. And I'm like, fuck no. Like, fuck that. Like, I think kids need to be given a level of autonomy and know, like, if your kid has a gut feeling, has a gut check, like, maybe dig deeper. Maybe ask about it. Like, hey, like, tell me a little bit more about what you're feeling. Or why don't you want to go to the slumber party? Would you tell me more about what Sally said? Like, or how Sally treat you make you feel sad? Like, friendships ending to me are not a failure. And it's important we actually destigmatize that a little bit.
Yeah. Like, take away that notion that you need to be friends with everyone.
Yeah.
And you have to be friends with them forever.
And you have to be nice to them all the time, even when they're mean to you and yelling at you in front of everyone else.
Right, yeah. I think for my mom, I think she saw the warning signs, but I think I was a opinionated, resilient child who didn't love to hear feedback from my parents. And I just think she didn't know how to approach the conversation. Like, because I remember after, like, all of it had ended, I was like, Mom, why didn't you say something? Like, why didn't you tell me that something was wrong? Because I, like, genuinely didn't know there was anything wrong.
Yeah.
You know, like, I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I was struggling and just thought that was what it was.
Yeah.
You know? And she just felt like she didn't know how to talk to me about it. And she didn't know how to do it in a way that wouldn't cause me an even greater rift between myself and my parents. And my friend she was very crafty and very good at putting separation between me and other people and anybody that could come in the way between me and her. And so she actually planted a lot of things and said a lot of things about my parents and about our families and myself and my siblings and things that made me feel separated from them. Which is another huge warning sign of abuse and controlling behavior is when you start separating people from their other relationships. So, which is like now just seems obvious. At the time, I genuinely thought that my parents were crazy and they didn't know me and they didn't care about me and my friend knew me the best and cared about me the most when actually she just needed help.
Yeah. That's a really interesting thing to bring up as well, is the relationship to your parent as you're going through something like that. Because I think the tendency can be like, oh, it's just like drama, it'll blow over. But I'm like, actually, man, like, I think kids really want their parents to advocate for them and to, like, in a way, stand up for them. Because sometimes kids don't know how to stand up for themselves. And, yeah, and I think for me, I didn't actually even know how to communicate fully. Like, because I was stuck in freeze for a long time. And it's like, I don't know, what do I think? Like, what did happen? Like, it's like I can, like, think about it and hold it in my mind, but I can't actually verbalize. And I think, yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about now as an adult, is I'm like, man, I think I really wanted my parents to advocate for me.
I agree. And I think it was the small things that really helped me figure it out on my own. And I think that needs to be the approach. It needs to be about empowering your kids.
Yeah.
And I think that comes in the form of asking really good questions, like, and then just saying very small things to help. Like, so I had a friend who said, that doesn't seem normal. and we moved on. It was not a big deal.
Yeah.
And that made all of the difference to me. Oh, that's not normal to you? Okay, well, maybe it's not normal then. Maybe there is something wrong. And like that helped me and my brain figure out, I am in an unhealthy situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, questions like, do you feel safe?
Yeah.
Are,
It's good.
Do you feel like, this friend is okay with you having other friends? Like just one question at a time, I feel like could have been, made a world of difference in me realizing, this is not how friendships work. But I mean, I think my parents did the best that they could. I just
Totally.
Again, there was not a lot of resources out there. We didn't know how to deal with that kind of stuff. And I think it's so beautiful now that there are more resources and more advocacy for people to get mental health on their own. But like, I'm like, people need support in how to support people with mental health. Like, in the same way that we've talked about how someone who's grieving or someone who knows someone who's grieving might not know how to best support them. I feel like the same with mental health. There's not a grid. There's just well, if you're struggling, you can do this. But if you have someone who's unwilling or, ignorant to what they need, like how do you keep yourself safe while also advocating for them? And those would have been great tools for me.
I agree.
Yeah. And I mean, in talking about like parents and like what they have no expectation that these falling outs would be so devastating to their kids.
Yeah.
Like I think about this wasn't really a dramatic falling out, but my best friend that I had from 2nd grade until 10th grade, so like 8 years, which is very long at that age, she moved away. And we kept in touch a lot. I visited her. She visited me. Like, we really tried to keep it up. And the relationship wound up sort of just falling apart. And I was so deeply devastated, so sad because I thought this person was going to be in my life forever. I had no expectation that she would ever not be in my life. And it felt like, I think you hit on this a little bit, Kellyanne, that it felt like you didn't know how to even express what it felt like. Because I think about my first breakup with a boyfriend, and I remember I cried, and I was like, I'm going to eat Ben & Jerry's because that's what you do, and I'm going to watch movies and cry, because that was like my grid based off of all the movies.
Yeah, that's what you do when you break up with someone. Yeah.
And so I was like, I knew that, but I didn't have a framework when I lost a friend to be like, how do I even cope with this? Or how do I even put this into words? It was just like, I just feel sad. And it wound up affecting other relationships too. One thing that I'm curious about, I feel like we sort of danced around this idea, is that how do you protect yourself from toxic friendships and see things like warning signs? How?
Well, I think it starts with knowing warning signs. So, I mean, I am not an expert in this, so I couldn't list them, but some warning signs that would have been helpful for me to know at the beginning would have been when someone is separating you from other friendships or relationships, when someone, or activities or things that you love, when someone will take you away from things that you yourself do independently.
Yeah.
And try and get you to do things that they want to do. When someone, is holding their mental health and life over you, being their friend. It's a pretty big one.
It's a big one.
And then when there's a lot of secrecy and like you can't tell anybody else or talk to anybody else. Those probably would have been the main warning signs to me, along with other things. But I think those are like basics.
Yeah. I mean, some other warning signs I think of is like if they like sort of brush off or discredit anything that you say, like consistently. Yeah.
That's a really good one.
That's one of the hardest ones, though. Like, I doubted myself in everything, you know? Like, I didn't know I didn't trust my gut. I didn't trust my instincts. Like, she was so willing to, like, build me up and tell me, like, you're so great. You're so amazing. You're the best human in the world. And then also, like, bring me really far down. And so she had a lot of control over what I thought and how I perceived the world. And I think, to me, and we talk about gaslighting a lot, to me, personally, gaslighting is one of the hardest things to recognize when it's happening to me. That is something that, like, I think needs support. Like, that's where your other friends come in. That's where your parents come in.
To ask those little questions.
Yeah,
that
to
help
be
you
like,
see.
wait, she said that? That doesn't make sense. No, that's not true. And then you're like, oh, you're right. Like, you know, because it's so easy to rewrite someone's memory.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I mean, one that I feel like is linked to that is sort of if they, like, assert their dominance over you. Like, I think about, I had several friendships where I felt like I had to be sort of a second-class citizen as a friend to them because they were the leader, you know? They were the dominant one. And so I just need to, like, go along with whatever they're saying.
Right.
And I need to just follow their lead. And that's totally fine because I just love being their friend. And so I'm just going to, like, humble myself and be this, like, lowly human because I want to maintain this relationship and they want to be this domineering, more, like, assertive person. And I think gaslighting is part of how that happens.
Well, and obvious power differentials. Like, huge age gaps.
Yep.
Like, huge wealth gaps. Like, things like that where somebody can give to you and then hold that over you.
Yeah, because you can't pay them back.
Right.
Yep.
You owe them.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I think for me, I don't necessarily look for warning signs of toxic relationships. I more look for warning signs of toxic people. And I'm like, hey, how does this person handle conflict? How do they handle drama?
Yeah.
How do they, like, I literally will, like, watch people for a long ass time before I decide, yeah, this is someone I actually want to engage with. I look for things like, do they choose to tell the truth when it's not popular? Are they kind to people even when they disagree? Those are things I look for because those are things I would hope to receive and also give back. And I think every relationship has the capability to be toxic. The question is more like, how are you going to handle things when the going gets rough together? And so by the time I find friends, I'm like, I actually really admire you as a person. And I'm willing to give my time. I'm willing to give my energy to you, two of my most valuable resources. And I'll be committed to that. And we will navigate what comes our way. And maybe one day when our relationship isn't beneficial anymore, we'll part ways, but we will look back with really fond memories and with the success of we supported each other through a season of life. So, yeah.
I think also
thoughts.
like empty promises. Or
Ooh, that's a bad one.
Or promises that are hard to believe. I don't know. Because maybe, I mean, to me, they were like, oh, yes, I believe this 100%, totally. But, like, things that seem lofty or extreme, you know, like, that to me, that should be a warning sign sometimes. I even think of, like, her parents. They kind of came in as my second mom and dad. And I called them mom and dad. And I not lived at their house, but I was at their house a lot. And they, you know, they fed me and put me up at their house overnight a lot. And, but when it came down to it at the end of everything, when I was like, hey, this is what's been going on, like, I can't do this anymore, they said, okay, thanks for telling us. And that was the last that I heard about it from them. And so somebody saying, hey, I'm like a father to you or a mother to you, like, that's like,
That's a big deal.
to me, that's a big deal. And I believed that. And then, I mean, I don't think I even realized that had been an unfulfilled promise in my life until like years after that had happened. And they never asked how I was doing.
Yeah.
Or how I was processing it, or if I was okay. Or like they just went and got support for their daughter, never said anything else about it.
Yeah. Not even a thank you.
Yeah.
Of like, hey, you actually changed the trajectory of our child's life.
Or like, just wanting to know if she's doing really well. Like, and like nothing.
Or that must have been really hard for you.
Yeah, nothing. And I think that in a way, I think it was like I had stopped supporting her and therefore I had stopped being there. You know, like my daughtership was conditional on my friendship with her daughter. And so things like that, from a parent perspective, from a friendship perspective, like I don't like when people will say things that are just seem a little bit
like that's
outlandish.
Not true, or that's you can't fully execute that.
Like, right.
And I think specifically when it comes to parents, I think there's like this weird loyalty thing.
Oh,
like,
totally.
oh, well, if I go over to this person, I could be betraying my own child. It's like, no. I think it's important for your child to actually see, hey, even though the relationship's really hard right now with this individual, we're still going to check on them because they've played an important role in our life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and even I have no idea. I can only speculate on what they said to her about me after everything happened. I mean, based on my experience, I imagine it wasn't good things.
Right.
But because it was kind of like you're in the circle, and if you're complying, you're accepted, and if you're not, then you're out. And that was very much their way of life. But like it probably would have been invaluable for them to have advocated on my behalf to her to help her process as well. Yeah. And help her. But yeah, they never addressed the cyberbullying or any of that. They were like not paying attention to it. So my parents knew about it, and my parents never addressed it either. They didn't know what to do. Nobody knew what to do. But it seems like there could be more resources. That's my thing. I wish there were more resources.
Yeah. And I mean, one thing that I think of too that falls in line with empty promises, I've had relationships where people make promises for the sake of like a false closeness.
Yes,
absolutely.
So for one example I think of was a girl that I was friends with in high school who would say things to me like, oh, like when you're a bridesmaid at my wedding one day and all these things. And I even remember in that relationship specifically thinking, I don't feel like we're there, but you're trying to like force some like further steps in our relationship than where we are. Yeah. And that definitely feels like manipulative to me.
It's like forcing vulnerability that's not actually there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Expedited relationship growth.
Yeah, trying to speed it up. For what? I don't know.
Yeah.
For the sake of feeling close to somebody. But that doesn't create a genuine foundation for friendship.
Right.
So, speaking of foundations for friendships, I feel like we've danced around this one as well a bit, but how have these falling outs affected your future relationships, friendships or otherwise?
I mean, I think I developed an entire protocol for that I still implement to this day out of some of the experiences I had, and it is I am not expediting any relationship. Like, I'm taking it as it comes, and I'm not going to be like, oh my God, we're now best friends, like, after hanging out for, like, a couple weeks. I do sit back and watch people, like I mentioned earlier. I take notes on assessing just where I think their character's at, like, how they handle conflict, how they handle, things that might not be fun for them. And I think I definitely also deal with the ramifications of, I think that through those traumatizing experiences and was when I fully became a one. And it's like, oh, like I have to do what is right. And if I do not do what is right, there are consequences to pay, and relationships are on the table as bargaining chips. And so I think for a really long time, that was where my stress and unnamed anxiety for a long, long time as a child and high schooler came from, of like, I just have to force myself to be fill in the blank. Which now, thank goodness, we are unraveling. Like, I'm like getting rid of that shit. I think it developed sometimes a hesitancy as well in me. And so I think that's the thing that I've learned in my mid-20s is you're just a grown-up kid. The things that you experienced, you actually keep with you. They don't just wash away with age. And you get to decide what to do with it. So.
Yeah, that's good. I think one thing I would attribute for sure to how I got into the situation I got into was being taught to do the right thing and not the gut thing. I feel like whether it's Christian or just the way I was raised or what, like I was taught like this is who you need to be a good person. And I wanted nothing more than to be a really good person. And so I would not listen to my heart or my body or my intuition and instead go with what seemed to me like the good thing. Like I'm going to hang out with this bullied individual and be their, trusted friend and support. And that to me was like the highest form of going against the status quo and, doing what's right instead of doing what's easy. That has a lot of good intentions behind it, but it resulted in me not listening to my gut. And so I think as an adult, doing some of those things, paying attention to warning signs, paying attention to the way somebody acts, how quickly they try to become your friend, how many friends they have and how long-lasting those friendships are, like how other people perceive them and talk about them. I think oftentimes people who are more well-liked are more well-liked for a reason, and people who are less liked for a reason. And that doesn't mean that we don't, it doesn't mean that we can dehumanize people who are bullied or who don't have as good social skills or whatever that is, but it does mean that usually when somebody is not jiving in society, there's a reason for it, and it's not your job to fix that for them. It's not my job to fix that for them. And so I think like being kind, but having boundaries with people who don't seem safe, as opposed to like going face first into those types of relationships. Because you feel like that's what a good Christian does. And really listening to my gut. That's a big thing.
Yeah, I want to echo that for sure, because I think for a really long time I was like expected to be like the nice good girl conditioning all day, every day. And by the time I was like 13, 14, I could actually read people really quick and be like, nope, not interested. Thanks so much. I'll be nice to you, but not coming to your birthday party, not hanging out one-on-one. And it was just because those are the things I was looking for. But that was really hard for people actually to grasp because it's like, oh, well, you're supposed to be nice to me. And I'm like, there's a difference between being nice and like, letting you violate my boundaries. There's a very big difference.
I don't know. Maybe this is a Midwest thing, but I like truly believed that like people who weren't cool were the good people. Like they were not all of them, but, and not like, not that cool people couldn't be good people either.
Totally.
But that like, you're a real human. And I think, honestly, this is just Disney Channel 101. Like, the popular people are mean and shallow and, heartless. And the unpopular people are cute and they, everyone likes them, but, they're dorky. And so, like, that was my frame of reference for, like, how you make friends. And, again, required me to deny a lot of that gut intuition. And then, I don't know, I think I didn't see things for the way they were.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I had a reversed problem to you in that sense that I so desired like popularity and status, especially in the beginning of high school.
Right.
And so my goals were oriented around cutting off the friends that didn't qualify as cool enough and trying to gain the friends that I thought did. And one thing that I had a major shift in my friend groups halfway through high school because I realized that that was wrong. And my friends became how to even describe our friend group? The liberal lesbian friend group was like my group. And the friendships were so much deeper and better because I wasn't worried about whether or not they were popular. And they weren't worried about whether or not they were popular. And that was definitely something I moved forward with from having these times where I tried to ghost friends. And also, I think recognizing the need to put effort into friendships if you really want them to last, Because I had that tendency to ghost people. I also thought for a while that I was cursed to have my best friends always move away because I had multiple best friends in a row that moved away. Like I'd get a new best friend and then they would move away and then I'd get a new one and then they'd move away. I was like, what? And so then like recognizing how to maintain relationships. And I think some of that comes also just with age and maturity. And now I have so many friendships that are not necessarily here in the place that I live that are super valuable and important to me. And so I think those are some of the things that I took away was realizing I guess how to better value friendships.
Well, and I don't also want to it's not that I didn't in my heart of hearts desire to be popular and cool and well liked among the school.
I mean, who doesn't?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was, but to me, to become the type of person that was popular and cool that I wanted to be, it had to be because I was so kind to everybody that I would become.
You'd be elevated up.
Yes, as the person who is kind to everybody. Yeah, whatever that is. Dumb.
Interesting.
But yeah, being a 3 and being poor and having unconventional parents and an unconventional family and all of that wrapped up into my core belief that uncool people were nice people. And all of that just resulted in a really confused person who didn't know how to be what I wanted to be. And didn't have realistic expectations about what that meant.
Yeah.
I think it's very interesting that you both had those experiences because I was in a group of 3 friends that were really, really close and we really loved each other. I mean, it's probably the closest I've ever been to girls other than my sisters. That is how close we were. And I genuinely loved these girls. And I still love them to this day. And we just happened to become the cool girls because we just had fun together and we, just did our thing. And it was because we were so close, we somehow formed a group. And then for some reason it became, those are the cool girls, so their feelings don't really matter. And I'm actually, I'm very sensitive and I've been through a lot. Therefore, I don't trust you. And that's why I'm
not your friend.
And I think it's really important. I think Brene Brown said this recently. And she said, everyone has a story that'll break your heart. And if you really listen, everyone has a story that'll bring you to your knees. And I think remembering that about people that look like they're having so much fun and have it all together and all the things. Because I remember there was this one time, this girl who was much older, I think I was 14 at the time and she must have been 17 or 18, started yelling at one of my friends in the bathroom. And I came out of the stall and I'm like, what are you even doing? Like, how, like, dare you? And she's like, don't try to play the good, nice girl. And I was like, I'm actually really nice. And, like, I think there's just this misconception. I mean, there are girls that are clearly not nice. That happens. But also just knowing, like, everyone has feelings and everyone has a story that'll make you cry. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and again, like, I think it goes back to, like, Disney Channel tropes. Mm-hmm. Like I think that shaped my worldview about what it meant to be cool and what it meant to be. And if you were going to be the cool person, you had to do it in a way that was because you were so kind and great to everybody that you've become the crown princess of your school, you know? Like, not...
Yeah. And it doesn't even address, well, what if you're trying to be nice to everyone and people are actually being really terrible to you?
Yeah.
And people are manipulating you.
Yeah.
And you're falling into these horrible relationships.
Yeah.
And you feel obligated to them because that is...
because you need to be the nice person.
You believe that it is your role in society, essentially.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yep.
And I think that was the interesting thing to watch is all the girls that lashed out or, like, that I would observe that would be mean were not the cool girls.
Yeah.
Like, the quote-unquote cool girls. And I'm like, I don't know what you're wanting that you think you don't have. Yeah. But I'm like, this facade that somehow this group of kids created around us, like us three girls being the cool girls, it's not real.
Mm-hmm. And actually, when I look back and I'm like, who's homecoming court and blah, 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 I'm like, actually, most of them were, like, really nice, like, smart, dedicated kids that were at school and, you know, and I don't think I wasn't, like, against them by the time I got to high school or whatever. But, like, yeah, there's a lot of expectation that those people be shallow and whatever. I don't know. Yeah. There's just a lot of layers to it. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah,
it's interesting.
Well, to kind of try to bring it all around and land this plane a little bit.
Land it.
I want to hear from you guys what... either, like, what you would say to other people that you feel like they should know about friendship breakups, or maybe what you wish that you had known.
I think, like, if I were speaking to young Kelly, and I had just been through what I had been through, I would want her to know, number one, just because it's a friendship doesn't mean it's less devastating than a relationship. Or a boyfriendship or girlfriendship, whatever you want to call it. Friendships are hugely defining in your life, not just as a teenager, but, like, your life. Friendships mean a lot to you. And so if you've been through something that, you know, is causing you distress, like, it's okay to, like, embrace that and go through that process, whatever that may look like for you. If a breakup ends dramatically, it's probably a really good thing that it ended. Mm-hmm. And there are people out there who will respect you, be courteous of your time and your resources and your space, and will love you. And just because it doesn't feel as intense or vulnerable or whatever as a more codependent relationship doesn't mean it's less genuine or supportive of your life. So those are probably the three main things.
Yeah.
No, that's really good. I really like that thought of if the breakup is super dramatic, it's probably good that you got out of it. Because for somebody to respond in that way, to turn this into a whole ordeal, like, that's not somebody who's a safe person. That's not somebody who is gonna value you and consider you. They're just considering themselves. And it's a good indicator that you made the right choice. I think that's really valuable. That's something I've noticed in romantic relationships and friendship breakups, is if there's this huge falling out, it's like, well, how much did you really care about me in this? And how much were you seeking for this to serve you?
And I'll add to that, even like if you leave a job or a church or something, a group.
Yeah.
Like if it's really dramatic and over the top and like.
Because if we really like care about these people, like, shouldn't we want the best for them?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Like your real friends are going to send you off with grace and compassion, and they might cry because they're going to miss you, but it shouldn't feel anything. You shouldn't feel anything but support.
Yeah. But also, those probably aren't the friends you're going to try to break up with.
Exactly.
It's true.
So,
Yeah.
Going off of that some, one of the things that I think about is like, I think conflict and like fighting is probably going to happen in friendships. Like, if you're living life with people, there's going to be conflicts. That's just the way that it works, because we are fallible humans and we make mistakes and we say hurtful things and we lash out or we have bad times or whatever. But knowing the difference between like healthy conflict and truly damaging conflict is something that I feel like I wish that I had known in navigating friendships, and knowing like, is this conflict coming from their attempts to like manipulate me? Is it coming from their insecurities and their insert toxic trait here? Or is it from, miscommunication that we had? Is it because we're hangry? Is it or tired? Is like, are we misunderstanding one another? Or is there like egging on of conflict that's happening? I think differentiating and evaluating those things is a skill that I've had to develop so that I don't wind up like walked over in friendships. And then also so that I'm aware that I'm not writing off friendships for no reason.
Well, and differentiating between, hey, when you did that thing, it really hurt my feelings, and being punished.
Yeah.
Because I think I experienced that a lot, of being punished for things and having to feel horrible about it. And only until I had groveled and been sad and expressed my deepest regrets to the point that she was pleased with, like I was like I don't know, in a relational jail.
Yeah.
Or timeout or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say to people going through friendship breakups is it's going to be okay. Like, and I'm really sorry. But also assessing like the why. I think that's really important. Get super clear on your why. And then I think having the decency to communicate to people. Like, hey, like, I think we need to chat about this. I've been having a really hard time in our relationship. Here's why. But also, like, I think sometimes we feel the need to rush to decisions and conclusions. Not in your case, Kelly. I think that was great.
No, I was late to the game on decisions and conclusions. Very late to the game. Yeah.
Like if it's abusive and damaging. But I think sometimes even taking like relational inventory. Like, hey, like we've moved away from each other and have really busy lives. I still really love you and want to stay in connection with you though. And being willing to have those conversations. One of my friends that I'm still very close with, we had one of those conversations within the past year. And having that conversation brought a lot of like, I feel like relief to both parties of like, hey, like, I really love you still. And I can definitely be more intentional. So I think understanding like the why, because you might come to a different conclusion. But also if someone's just bad for you, like cut that bitch off, you know? And I think it's really okay to self-advocate. It really is. And you should be your number one priority. And if that completely like ruins someone else's life, it's like, I'm so sorry.
I mean, at the end of the day, you can't be a good friend if you are struggling with your mental health because of a friendship.
Absolutely. And I think also like seeking out friendships that you can be really honest with. I mean, even the three of us, like literally like 2 or 3 nights ago, I was like, hey, I'm feeling really insecure about this. Like, and you guys are kind enough to be like, well, can we talk about that? And I'm like, yeah. Sometimes those things is all of a good relationship really needs to tick. Mm-hmm. And that is safety. But if you, at the end of the day, don't feel safe, then yeah, like I said, cut that bitch off. Like, bye. But yeah, I also want to echo a book that I read at the beginning of the pandemic because I went through a crazy resource moment where I read all the marriage books. And it makes me think that this applies to relationship as well. And it's, what is it called? It's How to Get the Love You Want. Very good marriage book. You don't have to be married to read it, at least for the first 2 sections. But it talks a lot about your brain and actually why you choose the people in your life that you do. And I think it's actually really important to know that your brain picks people on purpose to help you heal. So the people you're closest with most likely will actually trigger you and cause you some like friction. But it's like, why? Like, why is that friction there? I think is really important to identify because sometimes it is toxic and it's like, this isn't good. But sometimes it's like, oh, maybe this is an opportunity for me to heal.
Yeah. One last thing. You don't have to overshare. Gauge where your relationship's at. If you just like started being friends with a person and you realized in the process, dang, she crazy or he crazy.
Oh yeah.
It is okay to just let that relationship run its course. Like you don't need to overly get vulnerable with people or tell them like, hey, this is really toxic for me. I need to leave. Like,
yeah, that's fair.
Just, consider other people's feelings and what the best way to, some people, if you're really close, they deserve an explanation. But some people, you don't need an explanation. You can just
that's a fair point.
Let that go.
Like I said, I'm an expert ghoster.
Yeah. I mean, in my mind, that's not necessarily ghosting. To me, ghosting is like somebody that you have had a genuine relationship with and really built.
And never talk to them again.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, you have gone off the map.
Then I'm not an expert ghoster.
You can let someone go, but still be kind to them and still see them in settings and be like, hey, how are you doing without like initiating further.
See, to me, the ghosting I'm talking about is like cold shoulder.
I don't know you or don't talk to you.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm not talking to you. And we had the expectation that we would. But I'm done. I know. I told you I was terrible.
No, that's all right. I've had my own terrible moments.
Somebody's processing their trauma because of all of us at some point in their life. So
yeah, we've all hurt people along the way and also been hurt. And that's part of life.
Absolutely. I like what you said, though. Don't feel the need to give an explanation if the relational equity isn't there. I think also not feeling forced into vulnerability. Like your vulnerability should be your choice.
And this is like specifically for Christians. Like you don't owe anybody your life story.
Your testimony is yours.
Or your deep dark secrets. You don't owe anybody that.
Or your prayer requests.
Yeah.
You actually really don't need to give all of the prayer requests.
Yeah. And I think that's just like, that's a Christian culture thing. I think it's oftentimes really well intended. But just read the room. Some people you can share with, some people you can't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good points all around. Ladies, take a deep breath. Okay, that one was gross.
Just letting them stress out.
It didn't sound deep because it was like...
That's how it feels
like in
sometimes.
yoga, you do lion breaths where you go... That was very guttural.
You're good at it.
You're welcome, audio listeners. You get that. Thank you for being vulnerable right now and sharing.
You're welcome.
About friendship breakups and the hurt that comes from that. I think it's super valuable to talk about because, like we said, there's not a roadmap for it. It's not something people talk about enough.
And the irony is not lost that we're like, don't be too vulnerable with people who don't have the relational equity with you. But then we're here like on a platform just sharing very sensitive
and we have, we've chosen to do that It has some ramifications. I didn't even realize it had until later. It's fine.
Stay tuned to
You
hear
learn.
more.
You learn. You learn.
Yeah, but I do appreciate it. And part of our goal in being vulnerable here in a public way is to help you guys recognize you're not alone in the things that have hurt and the things that felt like you were alone in.
Yeah.
We want you to feel that we are there empathizing with you. So, yeah. If you guys want to, share friendship breakup stories with us,
That'd be
go
interesting.
for it.
Send us all the Instagram audio messages. I'm here for it.
Instagram audio messages.
Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah, I know, but it's just a funny thing to request. Send us a DM,
Just tell
comment
us.
somewhere on Instagram.
I mean, you can film a video if you want to.
Yeah,
You can
tell us about it.
send us a full documentary about it.
We will air it
10-page
here.
essay.
But yeah, or maybe hopefully this gets you thinking about friendships that have hurt you and get you on a path to processing them if you haven't.
Yeah, hopefully this can be the, hey, is that normal? Question that you need to start processing for sure, what you're experiencing.
Yeah. So all that being said, we're going to wrap this one up. Thank you guys so much for listening. And be sure to follow us on Instagram at Woman Being Podcast. Check us out on our website, womanbeingcommunity.com, and on all the podcast platforms. We're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, we're on Stitcher. And leave us a review. That's super helpful for other people to get hooked up with the content that we're putting out. So if you've gained something from this, we'd really appreciate it if you could leave a review so that other people can gain from it too. So, ladies,
That's it.
that's all, folks.
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap. All right. Bye.
Bye.
See ya.